Good evening and welcome. Okay.
Tell us when you're ready, Aaron. Microphones are way too high.
Okay.
Are we better? We are
I
better?
think it's better. Okay. Good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. It is 7:03 on Monday, December 5th, and I call to order this regular meeting of the Richfield School Board. Attending this evening's board meeting live and in the boardroom are Crystal Brackey, Eric Carter, Allegra Schmichek, and board chair for today, Paula Cole, and we are joined by our student representatives. We have Elsie Cruz Parra, we have Shimdalut Dibua, sorry, and we also have Paola Hernandez Zuniga with us, along as Superintendent Yunowski, our board secretary Cassandra Kwam, and we also have members from our district cabinet and educators. Let's see, thank you to everyone joining us here live and in the boardroom. And also, if you're watching at home tonight, welcome. Thank you for being with us. With that, the first business tonight is to approve the agenda.
I'll move the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first motion by Ms. Michek and a second by Ms. Brackey. Any questions, comments? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone nay? The board votes yes, and the agenda is approved. We will now move to information and proposals, and these are non-action items this evening, and we pass the mic to Superintendent Yunowski.
All right, three things on the agenda tonight. We are acknowledging a very generous donation to Richfield High School. We have our Truth in Taxation hearing, and we have a presentation from Centennial Elementary School. And I'm going to look to Mr. Holge to see if I'm able to switch around the Truth in Taxation and Centennial presentation, or do we need to do, he is saying no, so I'm going to apologize to our Centennial delegation, who's going to be a little later than we had hoped. All right, so I'm going to begin by acknowledging a donation. Richfield High School received a donation in the amount of $25,000 and $69 additional dollars and 77 cents from Lillian Yamamoto of Edina, Minnesota. Ms. Yamamoto is a parent of multiple students who attended Richfield Public Schools in the past. Ms. Yamamoto shared that she was always impressed with the teachers and staff of Richfield and is appreciative of the opportunities available to her children. So we often, at the end of our meeting, and we'll also formally accept in our donation segment, but we also wanted to make this in the superintendent report because much like the Spartan Foundation, when they make large donations to Richfield, we note that publicly, and so we want to publicly acknowledge the extreme generosity of Miss Lillian Yamamoto. So thank you very much, and we are honored to receive your gift.
Many thanks.
And many thanks on behalf of our students and our staff. So thank you, thank you. With that, we are going to turn things to Mr. Craig Holge for Truth in Taxation.
Very good, thank you very much. Tonight we have our public hearing for taxes, which is often referred to as the Truth in Taxation hearing. As we move to the next slide, you'll see this presentation is part of the Minnesota state requirement to ensure governmental budget transparency and opportunities for public comment. Much of the information is required by statute, but it also provides us an opportunity to share with our community our financial status and operations. Following this presentation, the board is able to act on the final levy for the coming calendar and fiscal years. And as we move on, tonight we will share information about the background of school funding, go over the current year budget, present the proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2023, and then provide the opportunity for public comment. It is important to note that the Minnesota State Constitution requires the legislature to provide for funding through a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. Local taxes are one opportunity along with other funding that comes through the state to provide this program. School funding is highly regulated, and any taxing authority of the school board must be within guidelines identified by the state. Most of our revenue is specified on a per pupil or per student basis. The state authorizes a maximum levy each school district can levy. While local boards can authorize less than this amount, they are not able to authorize more. School boards are also authorized to submit referendums for operating and capital needs, but those also must be within state required limits. One of Richfield's largest funding sources is through a state allocated formula for general education revenue. This is state funding generated on a per pupil basis. For 22-23 school year, this formula allowance is $6,863 per student, which was a 2% increase from our previous year of $6,728. The level of state funding for 23-24 is not yet set, and that will be determined by the state legislature in the upcoming session this spring. The next slide illustrates how the state funding has not kept up with inflation since 2002-2003, and it would take an 18.4% increase, or $1,263 more per student per year to make up that difference. And the next slide just shows that illustration with the blue line being the inflationary increases off of that base year of 2003, and the dotted orange line being the actual formula allowances. And with that, you can see the net impact of that funding differential over the last couple of years, specifically with those inflationary factors. Special education is another area that has seen increased costs for specific programs serving students with identified needs. While programming in this area is specialized and often within certain required services to make sure all students are served, this programming comes with additional costs that are not fully covered by the funding specified for these services. As such, districts are required to bridge this gap with other funding sources such as local revenue or general education funding. And because school funding is complex, a change in the tax levy does not always correlate directly with the dollar-for-dollar increase in the school budget. Tax levies are based on many different formulas, and some increases in tax levies are actually offset by reductions in state aid, so they have a neutral factor. An expenditure budget is impacted by overall changes in state formulas, voter-approved levies, and the use of fund balance or reserve dollars. And the next slide highlights the advanced planning that's required for school funding, which is a little different from cities and other municipalities. Our budget year begins on July 1 and coincides with the school year. The taxes authorized by the levy being presented this evening will be collected from property owners between January 1 and December 31, 2023, but will be used to fund the school district from July 1, 2023 to June 30, 2024. And our preparation for this levy actually began this past summer in July of 2022, with the preliminary levy authorized in September, so property owners could receive information from the county about their proposed taxes in November. Tonight we'll also be sharing information about our current year 2022-2023 budget, because the budget funded by the proposed levy is still being developed and will not go into effect until July 1, 2023. School district budgets are broken up into multiple funds, with the general fund being the one that provides most of our regular education programming. Each year the budget is authorized by the school board in June for the budget year beginning July 1. This slide has a lot of numbers and a lot of columns on it. Shows an overview of the fiscal year 22 and fiscal 23 budgets. It highlights the revenues and expenditures for each of the funds as well as the fund balance. Overall, you can see our fund balance is declining because of our building construction project, which was funded initially through bonds. The general restricted fund is funding that can only be used for specific purposes with our general operating programs. And you'll notice that most funds are relatively stable with revenues and expenditures. Over the past few years, we have seen an increase in our general fund reserve associated with additional federal dollars and contained expenditures, but you'll notice that we're starting to experience and project a slight decline in these reserves this coming year. And if you're wondering why the revenues and expenditures are shaded for the internal service fund, this is because these funds come in and out of the other funds in our budget, and reporting those funds in this format would inflate the overall revenues and expenditures in the district specifically. Next, we're going to examine our revenues. Our general fund accounts for 83.6% of our overall revenue of just over $87.9 million. Our debt service, which accounts for the funding associated with our construction project and other post-employment benefits, is the next highest category, and food service and community education each represent about 2 to 3% of our overall revenue. And focusing on our general fund specifically, 62.4% of that revenue comes from the state, 26.1% comes from local property taxes, and 11.5% comes from the federal government. So you can see the impact of that levy in that general fund revenue. Next, looking at the general fund expenditures, because we are a highly human capital-based organization, 77.5% of our expenditures go to pay salaries and benefits for staff. 12.3% of our budget goes to purchase services for things like specialized transportation and fees to other schools. And when we look at those expenditures by program, 43% or $32 million is spent on regular instruction, 18.7% is spent on special education instruction, 11.2% is spent on sites and buildings, 11.2% is spent on pupil support services such as transportation and counseling, and 6.7% on instructional support such as technology, media, curriculum, and staff development. Just under 4% is spent each on licensed administration and support services. Next, we'll review the property tax levy process, proposed levies, and the impact on taxpayers. Each owner of taxable property pays taxes to various municipalities, city and county specifically, along with school districts. Each jurisdiction sets its own tax levy within the limits set by the state, and this levy is facilitated by the county, which sends the tax statements, collects the funds, and distributes them to the appropriate jurisdiction. In November of each year, property owners receive the notice of proposed taxes from the county. Hennepin County is responsible for distributing these statements for Richfield Public School District residents. And as identified earlier, school levies are very complex and are calculated by Minnesota Department of Education. The levy is based on various categories and limited by state law and voter approval. The next slide highlights the steps in the process, and you'll note as we look at this, only one of these steps is actually controlled by the school district. As you can see, the city and county determine the estimated market values. The legislature sets formulas of how various properties are taxed, including residential versus commercial. The county auditor calculates the tax impact for each parcel based on these formulas. The legislature sets maximum levy limits for school districts. The Minnesota Department of Education calculates those detailed levy limits. The school board adopts the proposed and final levies, and the county auditor then takes the final levy information to finalize the tax for the individual properties. The next slide articulates the process that results in the levy being recommended this evening, and you can see that really started September 8th with MD preparing that and ends following this tax hearing with the board certifying the final levy. Looking next at the proposed levy for this evening, there's a proposed increase of 3% in the local revenue. However, we'll illustrate later that this actually results in a net impact on the typical owner that is relatively flat or neutral, with a decline for the same property value and only a slight increase when average property value increases are considered. We'll also illustrate the reasons for major changes in the levy. This slide illustrates some of the various aspects of the levy and the various funds. In the general fund, you will note increases in the capital projects or technology referendum, operating capital, as well as the voter-approved debt service account. And there are also decreases in the voter-approved referendum, local optional revenue, long-term facilities maintenance, and the prior year adjustments. And just to pull out a couple of those larger changes, first of all, in the voter-approved referendum, there's a decrease of $154,328. This is primarily the result of a projected reduction in enrollment. Next, in the general fund, we have a voter-approved capital projects or technology levy. This is an increase of $383,601 this year, and this is primarily resulting in the increased tax base, much of which is aligned with commercial property in the Richfield School District. And then finally, in the debt service fund, there is an increase of $765,588. This is primarily the result of increased statutory authority related to the 2017 voter-approved school facilities referendum that allowed the district to issue additional bonds for construction projects. Next, we can take a look, and there are many factors that result in a change in taxpayer school taxes, including change in value of an individual property, change in all property values in the district, and changes in levy amounts due to formula changes or voter-approved referendums. And the following slides will show some examples of changes in the school district portion of property taxes from 2020 to 2023. They are looking only at our school district taxes and will illustrate the impact with no change in property valuation. So somebody who has a 4-year continuous $250,000 property value, as well as a 17.3% increase in property values over that 4-year period of time, which is the average increase in property values in the district. Actual changes will vary from parcel to parcel, with estimates having been prepared by Ellers, who is the district's municipal advisor. The first slide here provides an overview of various property values in Richfield School District for residential, commercial, and apartments. It illustrates the tax impact on various property values, holding the value constant from 2020. Despite the overall increases in revenue from the proposed levy, there is still anticipated to be a net reduction in the impact to the average property owner in all areas from 2022 to 2023, and this net reduction is even larger when you look at the change from 2020 to 2023. Looking specifically at the last two columns in that slide, you'll see those differences from 2020 as well as from the last year, pretty much across the board showing reductions. Next, we're going to move on and look at some illustrations. The average single-family residential property in Richfield is about $300,000. This slide shows the year-over-year school tax change of a couple of property values in this range, and you can see that $275,000 had a slight increase of about $22 this year, but had a net reduction from $1,266 to $1,027 this year from 2020 to 2023, and a similar line for the property value at $325,000. And again, looking at valuations of commercial and apartment properties, similarly, you can see that decline in the commercial and property tax rates or taxes over that same period of time, inclusive of typical market value. And then the next two slides are going to account for changes in property value with the increases that most homeowners have seen in Richfield over the last few years. This slide shows the year-over-year school tax change for residential homestead property when the increase in market value is included. Looking specifically, you can see that really is a small amount, with that $325,000 home this year seeing essentially a $31 increase in property values, and yet still lower than where it was in 2020. And then the next slide shows that commercial and non-residential apartment with similar impacts with those increases in values factored in. And then we would like to finally conclude with highlighting a couple of tax savings opportunities for property owners. The first is a homestead credit refund or circuit breaker program that's available to homestead property owners or renters within income guidelines, generally about $119,790 or less. This refund requires completion of the M1 PR state tax form. There's also a specialty property tax refund for homestead property owners with higher gross tax increases. This also requires completion of the M1 PR tax form. And finally, there's a senior citizen property tax deferral that allows people over age 65 with income less than $60,000 to defer a portion of their property taxes until the home is sold or the homeowner dies. And then finally, looking at next steps, the next steps, the board will accept public comments this evening on the proposed levy. And we're also requesting that the board certify the proposed levy later this evening during the action items on the board agenda. So with that, we would open up for public comments if there are any, or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Holge. I don't believe we have anyone signed up for public comment. Does anyone here have any questions or comments?
I have one question, which is just refreshing my memory. Outside of this hearing, do we do anything to directly communicate with taxpayers about these numbers? And I think specifically to help explain what the Richfield Public Schools portion of these numbers are amid all of the other numbers that they get from the county?
Yep. So, and I've actually had a couple calls from the property tax statements that went out in November. So the November, Hennepin County sends out a detail of here's the county taxes, here's the city taxes, here's the school district taxes, and it breaks it down with what's the voter approved and what are the other levies that are associated with that. I've actually had 2 calls regarding that, so that's more than I had last year. One was specifically inquiring about the difference between voter approved and the other levies. The voter approved are those specifically that are voter approved. They include our capital projects, technology referendum, our building, voter approved referendum, our operating our operating referendum that were passed. So those are in that voter-approved category. And then all of the other levies that are provided by statutory authority, our local optional revenue, LTFM, achievement and integration, and some of those other levies are ones that are funded that way. So that's the primary form of communication that drills down for specific taxes. And individual homeowners can see that impact on or individual property owners can see that impact on their property that they own. We also have multiple points that we're reporting to the board on the budget. So the budget's approved in June. There's a revised budget that usually occurs early on in the new calendar year, January, February, March. And then the board also receives kind of a year-to-date accounting on each one of those as well.
But it sounds like, no, we don't.
Correct.
And the reason I'm asking is just to connect to, if we are going to be having conversations about potentially, renewing our technology levy and looking at our operating dollars. Like, I think, I just want us to be thinking proactively about how we are communicating with people and being able to put in understandable terms, like this reality that actually the increases that people might be seeing on their property taxes that are tied to Richfield Public Schools are actually very, very responsible, in my opinion, and very small. And I worry that that gets lost and that we might not be doing enough to actually make that come through clearly. That's all.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got questions.
Oh,
Sorry. Thank you for the presentation. Super fast. A lot of data. And I guess I'll start, Chris, with your comment. I mean, to that end, there's so much data, and like obviously you've done this more than once. It's thinking about how we communicate to the public is like, as I sit here, there's like tons of information going, how can you boil it down to like a handful of slides to explain it to somebody, because you're only going to get them for a tweet, right? It's like, and so how do we kind of sell what we're doing here? One of my questions on page 22 and 23, do we track our expenditures against other districts? I mean, you kind of had a great pie chart of showing here's kind of where we spend money. Are we similar to other districts? Are we different? Do we care?
We're very similar, but we also find with some of this, districts are in different situations. So we've just gone through a larger building project, and so we will be spending more money on construction than what maybe some other school districts are doing, and then they will start to spend more money. So we haven't done any recent baselining in those areas. We do know that our voter-approved operating referendum per pupil tends to be lower than most of our neighboring districts, so that's kind of the voter-approved taxes piece. But the detail around the expenditure categories and things like that, we haven't done anything recently that looks at those in a baseline area.
Okay. And I guess to that end, does the state do that? Like, does the state compile the information and go, ooh, here's how like school districts across the state are spending money?
So all school districts are required to report to the state using the various funding categories, so salaries, benefits, wages, and things like that. And so we're able to gather that information and take a look at it and see. What we often don't have is what is that narrative about what are the different programs that school districts are prioritizing and things like that. But we have the ability to look at that through some analytics and information that's available on state websites. But they don't do a easy comparison that looks at that specifically that I'm aware of.
Okay. And then I guess the last question, and I'm not sure, I'll turn to you two, put you on the spot. The public comments, did we announce it at our last meeting? And I just forgot because it was 2 weeks ago.
Yes, and then, so it's in the agenda, and then, yes, it is out there also on this agenda. So it was in last meeting.
And it's also in the proposed tax statements that identify the fact that there's a truth in taxation hearing that's occurring this evening with that opportunity for public comment.
Maybe I guess just more procedurally, so I understand as the newbie, are the public comments the same as the normal public comments, or is it more of a, ooh, I want to talk?
Right, there's the regular public comment, which is on the first board meeting of the month.
Yep.
And then we also have truth in taxation always as an extra public comment specific to truth in taxation.
second meeting of the month.
Second meeting of the month, yes, thank you.
That's why, I can't remember, we set this hearing several months ago so that the public comment aspect of it could also be reflected in the information that went out and in the agendas.
And so is it the same kind of, I get 3 minutes to go ahead and talk versus just questions?
So there, with the truth in taxation, I don't believe there's the same requirement for signing up in advance. So if somebody were here, they would have that opportunity to present. Quite honestly, I don't remember the last time anybody, over 15, 20, 17 years, I don't think anybody's ever commented other than maybe in 2005, 2006 when I first started. But the information is available. One of the calls I had today had some questions and said, I know there's a hearing tonight and an opportunity for public comment. So that information is out on that property tax proposed statement. With that information, if they have the right to show up here. So if somebody hadn't signed up but still came tonight to share information, they would have that opportunity.
Great. I'm just real curious just kind of how this all works and how are people able to kind of chime in? Because again, kind of back to Crystal's question of how can people participate and get engaged? Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. Now, thank you.
Thanks, Craig.
It's a great question, Mr. Carter.
All right, and now, without further ado, our lovely and wonderful team from Centennial. So I'm excited to call up to the microphone literacy coach Amy Sobraski and literacy interventionist and formerly the literacy coach at Centennial, Patty Finley. Principal Colleen Mahoney was not able to be here with us tonight. And so Amy and Patty have graciously agreed to present as our teacher leaders. So take it away, team.
So here we are. That was my introduction, so thank you for doing that for me. I like that. Yeah, thank you for having us here tonight. We're here to talk a little bit about what's going on at Centennial regarding literacy. As Dr. Yanowski mentioned, I was the literacy coach for the past 2 years. I'm actually math intervention this year. And Amy Sobraski is our new literacy coach. And I don't want to embarrass her, but I have to say she's doing an absolutely beautiful job. So it's really, really nice to have her on board as our literacy coach. And we have some time that we can talk things over, and it's really a lovely setup. So again, thank you for having us here. We have a combined teaching experience, if I'm the math person, right, so I should get this right, of 41 years in the district. So we have been here some time, and we love our jobs. We love Centennial.
So here is the MCA data, and if you look, in 2001, it took a dip, and we relate that to COVID. It was just really hard for our students to learn online. And there were a lot of struggles, and that showed in the data. And we're working really hard on making accelerated growth now and recognizing that dip. And we use baseline, gather some baseline data and diagnostic data to know where we can reach the students and help them make that accelerated growth.
Oh, I'm not sure that everything, okay. So one of the ways that we measure our students' success in literacy is by looking at how they're doing with their fluency. And it is our goal at Centennial that Centennial students gain at least 1 word per week when they are being progress monitored on a grade level text. Amy's going to talk a little bit more about using the data and how we collect data for fluency. I do think there's something on here about, I have it in front of me. We teach at their reading level, and then we assess at grade level. So if a child is not at grade level, they're doing their, well, no, I'm going to take it away from you, but anyway, you know, they're practicing at their independent or instructional level during the week with repeated readings, but then when they're assessed, they are assessed at grade level. And we're still looking for that gain of at least 1 word per week.
So using data effectively classroom teachers are collecting fluency data weekly or bi-monthly, at least 2 times a month. And if students are not at grade level, either with their fluency or we do a phonics blending assessment, then we dug a little deeper with using a PRESS diagnostic. So knowing their foundational skills, what they're strong in and what they're lacking in, and how we can give explicit instruction towards those foundational skills. And so teachers have been working in teams to group students across the grade level and kind of share, especially 3rd and 4th grade. They've been sharing the instruction. So one teacher will teach the group of students that need work on CBC words, and another teacher will teach the students who need practice on their fluency. And so they're getting that explicit instruction of what they really need to show growth. So that's the WIN groups that we're talking about with the foundational skills and the direct phonics instruction. When they're doing fluency instruction, they're doing purposeful repeated readings, the teacher's modeling, and the students choral read often with the teacher reading a little bit louder so they can practice with their voice how that sounds. And once students are at or above grade level, they're working explicitly on read alouds and the comprehension piece. And they also get that different times during the day in different contents and through interactive read alouds. And students know what their group is working on and how it's going to improve their reading. So that's really important at Centennial, is they know the why of why they're doing something and what they're working towards.
I wanted to mention, and you most likely know this, but the WIN is, it stands for what I need. And so students are grouped across the grade level with whatever it is that they need right now. And of course, during our COVID time, we had to keep our kids in pods, and so doing that kind of grouping wasn't possible. But it's been really working well, especially in our third grade, really great, and 4th grade is starting it now too. And that is, it's for a short time of the day, maybe 25 minutes or a half an hour, but it's really a model of intervention that has been proven to work, and it is working. Yeah.
So the next slide is showing what the progress monitoring looks like weekly or bi-monthly.
Your grandpa, how many words did you read? 140 words. Yeah, that's awesome. What's your goal for this week? 150. Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And then the second video is showing how the student reads, and the teacher listens, and then they discuss the progress. And if you see on the left the progress monitoring chart, that's the really important part for us. The students track their growth, and they know, as you can see, they know what they read and what they're working towards. So it really motivates them.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Brandon wasn't much of an athlete. It wasn't that he didn't like sports. He really did like basketball. But he was better at tripping and crashing into things than he was at making baskets.
And you can see with that student, fluency isn't just speed reading. That's not what we're looking for. We want them to read with expression and to be fully comprehending what they're reading. And so we've been gathering and monitoring data from every student, 1 through 5. And so the first set of data is from the fall baseline assessment, and then the second set is where students were at the end of Q1. So after 8 weeks of instruction, we've seen so much growth when we've been able to really target what they need. And we were looking at this earlier, talking about how we noticed that 4th grade students had made the most significant gains. And we talked about how many of those students, according to their baseline and the diagnostic assessments, have those strong foundational skills. So the teachers have been able to work on more fluency practice versus revisiting the foundational skills that might be missing. So.
Family involvement. We know that COVID presented quite a challenge when it came to family involvement because our families weren't allowed in the schools. And there was a time where kids weren't allowed in the schools either. And so family involvement, while always very, very important, really, really took a hit. Last year, we attempted to involve families with something called One School, One Book, and you might recall that Colleen Mahoney and Betsy Matus and I presented to the school board. We were reading the book, The Miraculous Adventure? Journey, sorry, of Edward Tulane. Thank you. And every adult in our building, every staff member, the students, families, everybody read the book. Every child got their own book to take home and read with their family. And it was a lot of fun, and we're planning to do it again this year with a book called Lemonade Wars by Jacqueline Davies. I'll let you talk about the rest of it.
And we've, through the CLSD grant, we've ordered multicultural books. So every classroom teacher has a really beautiful selection of classroom books for their library, or a classroom library for their classrooms. Our media has just an abundance of books now that have recently been purchased, that our students see themselves in the books, and that's what's really important to us. We had a successful book fair at Centennial over the conferences, so the PTSO donated more books to the media, and as well as teachers are going to get funds to purchase more books. So we're all about books.
And then Amy put together a literacy bingo night. That was
in
early October, which was very well attended.
Yeah, we weren't sure what to expect, being the first in-person event really since COVID, and the whole lunchroom was full. We didn't have enough seats for everyone, so it was really well attended, and people were so excited to be back in the building, and staff came. It was such a great community building event, so we hope to do many more of those.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay, sure. So here are some supports that we've been doing, and some of them are new and some of them we've been doing for a while, but Patty's been the literacy coach for the past 2 years, and this is my first year, and so we work with teachers. In the past, they did 2 coaching cycles. This year, each teacher signs up for 1 coaching cycle that lasts a quarter, and then many times I continue to work with, if they still want my support, which has been the case, we continue to work and set goals, as well as teachers that aren't on a coaching cycle. We reach out and set goals and find resources and work together to get our students to be the best readers they can be. And then
I think it's a real positive too that teachers who are not on a coaching cycle are asking for help, asking for support. Sometimes coaching has been seen as, oh, that's one more thing I have to do. But what it indicates to me is that we have a really talented literacy coach right here who is making it feel like it's not one more thing I have to do. This is something that's really helping me with my practice, and that we're seeing results. The students are making growth, and I think that's just a really important thing to acknowledge. So I'm very excited about that. The other thing I just wanted to mention is at the very bottom, on my sheet of paper here, it talks about students tracking their own progress. And we had a picture of one of the graphs, the fluency graphs. Students are tracking their own progress in other areas of their day too. And we just feel that it's really important that, the students know what the learning target for the day, what the learning target is for the unit, what's going on here, what is it, and why do I need to know this, what's the relevancy, and how am I going to show that I do know this material. So that's really, really important, and one of the things that is very motivating to students is when they're able to track their progress, they're able to fill in their graph, and they are seeing their growth. And I don't know if you were able to hear that. Students say that her goal had been 40 words in a minute, And well, and Amy said, well, what's your goal going to be for this week? She said 50. And I don't know if she made it or not, but you know what? She was believing in herself. She had a positive attitude, and you know, this is what we need from our students. And so it's really fun as a teacher to see that excitement about learning. Yeah.
So those kind of just highlight the things. And then here's the end of the quarter celebration we started this year. We just wanted a fun way for everybody in the school to get to celebrate their hard work. So at the last day of the quarter, we did it for quarter one, and we're going to continue to do it. All the classes stood in the hallway, all the staff was in the hallway. Miss Mahoney made an announcement just congratulating all the students on their hard work. And then if you play the video, you get to see the fun.
And this was done, obviously, at the end of the day, which was probably a really good idea. That's why they have their coats on, their boots on, and such. And then I just learned today from Colleen that a student that I know really well said, this was the best day of my life. And, you know, it doesn't, sometimes when we think of celebrations, we think of rewards, or we think of celebrating with food or a pizza party or whatever, and those are all great things. But we have to, you know, we have a budget, and we have to keep everything in mind. And really, I think for the kids to all be together at the end of the quarter, knowing what they were celebrating, they were really thrilled to be there. And I think it was fun for them. Yeah. It didn't cost anything.
Yep, and there were lots of smiles at the end of the day, so.
Well, that's our presentation, and we're happy to try to answer any questions you might have. And if there's something we can't answer, we will
Take a note
be happy
and
to.
look at Ms. Mahoney to answer.
We'll be happy to get back to you.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Let's see, open floor for questions. Let's just chat literacy. Any one of my colleagues who would like to go first?
Sure. Thank you so much for the presentation. I loved the fluency chart and the progress monitoring. I just think that's incredible. Student ownership of learning and increases agency and engagement. So I was really excited to see that. I also wanted to congratulate you on the CLSD grant. I know that was a highly competitive grant. And one of the things you mentioned was that it funded multicultural books. I was curious what other ways at Centennial it impacted. Like, did it fund some of the coaching positions? And just what impact has that had?
Yeah.
And Dr. Yanowski might be able to know like the exact logistics, but yeah.
Dr. Daniels is coming
Yeah,
on
Dr.
up.
Daniels
Dr.
can.
Daniels
Yes.
is coming on up to talk about the CLSD grant and funding the coaching positions and.
Good evening, everybody. Woo! Yes, CLSD funded all of our literacy coaches. It also funded our literacy family interventions at our early learning ages. And so we are leveraging that grant to push in literacy support across all of our buildings. And Patty also used to work in math with, we have two math coaches that work to support the 4 elementaries as well. But CLSD support all of our literacy coaches at each building and at the early learning sites as well.
Fantastic, thank you.
We used some of the CLSD money to buy the books for the One School, One Book last year, and again, we'll be doing that this year.
And we use some of the funds for the literacy bingo night. There are some tangible things that we can. There's a budget that we can use for literacy related needs at our school. So
I think one of the perhaps most appreciated things that we were able to purchase were the classroom libraries for teachers. And, you know, if you've been in education for any length of time, you remember, especially K-5 education, you know, spending lots and lots of your own money to have a library for kids. And everybody has done that, and it's okay. But we haven't always had the books that have the windows and mirrors. And so now we do, and it's really high-quality literature. And one of the things that we also helped our teachers do was kind of cull their classroom libraries. So they don't have to have every book they've ever owned out. And there are some books that probably shouldn't maybe be out in the classroom. They could be your favorites at your home, but as far as classroom, maybe they don't belong there for a number of reasons. And so we were able to help teachers decide which books should stay and which books not. And it's giving, I think it's giving our kids a higher quality experience with the books that they have in their hands.
One last question I had. Podcast that has grown in popularity, Sold a Story. It's very compelling regarding literacy.
Yes.
And we're beginning to have some questions from our community regarding our literacy instruction. You did mention in the presentation a few things, but I was just hoping you would re-emphasize that in Richfield, we do phonics instruction based on research, and our literacy program is research-based.
Yep. And like I've been listening to that too, and it's I think it's important to acknowledge also data that comes out. But so as part of the CLSD grant, we also get to meet with some coaches from the at the state level, and so as a coach, I do a lot of professional development myself. So I've been learning so much about explicit phonics instruction to like go along with our current curriculum also. And we just had a meeting with Rachel Jens, and with the CLSD funds, we talked about purchasing maybe some more decodable readers. So we are acknowledging that, and also acknowledging that we have a research-based curriculum that we're currently using too. So we just need to meet the students where they are. We need to know what they're able to do, and then how we can get them at grade level and successful readers that can comprehend what they're reading. So.
And then the only thing to add to that is in our curriculum review cycle, language arts actually is up, and literacy curriculum is up for review over the next year. And so the team will be beginning to examine that, the likelihood of determining if we're remaining with the same curriculum or moving to a different curriculum. And it would probably, I think it's in the year 2024, 25 is when that launch would occur after all the voice and research and review occurs.
Thank you.
Add anything about that?
I won't add anything specifically about that, but just in general, we will dig more into the details about this at our next presentation on the 19th when we present World's Best Workforce, and I'm bringing our elementary and secondary directors to talk even more about the work that we're doing academically to address our achievement disparities.
Thank you.
Okay, who else? Who else has questions?
I've got questions.
All right.
I'll just go right off yours. Might as well stand up. I mean, well, I did, I'm not saying
Just
you have
pull
to
up
go.
a third
Just
chair.
pull up a third chair. It's gonna be a party. I got questions. I have questions for all of you. And maybe, I mean, I think you're,
Over here.
you're coming back in 2 weeks and giving us some more answers might be great as well, because some of the questions might not be able to be answered tonight. I do have some specific ones. If you could go back to slide 46, please. It's the one with the big arrow. Oh, I'm sorry. I understand. Slide 3.
It's the MCA data. It's the second slide of the presentation.
I mean, maybe I missed it, but what was the intent of the arrow?
Ms. Mahoney created this slide. So I think she was just, pointing out that that from 2021 to 2022, we are seeing more growth where it dipped down, but now we're starting to see gains again. So I think she was highlighting
So yeah,
that.
and in working on this with Principal Mahoney, she wanted to make sure that we were clearly looking at reading because literacy was the point. We had been making consistent progress through 2019 and had been slowly grinding our way forward. Not results that we want to have in the end, but they were always moving in a positive direction. And then COVID came, and obviously we struggled, and then we made a small step forward after that.
So those numbers, 35%, 36%, 24, 26, what is that telling me?
That is the percentage of students proficient, and those are the number of students proficient in the parentheses. It gets presented more in depth. This was just an illustration of where we are in overall proficiency from the MCA.
So 1 in 4 are proficient. 25%. Sorry, 26.
25.6% of Centennial students on the MCA test last year were proficient. Correct. And the presentation in 2 weeks will give you much more in-depth data in the World's Best Workforce Report.
Okay. 2 slides later. How many students? So talk about the diagnostic test. So if they're not at grade level, so then the 3 out of 4 students, are they taking this PRESS test?
Yes, so we are using 2 assessments. So, well, 3 to really pinpoint what we need. So the first would be just a baseline grade level fluency, like are they able to fluently read? Because we know if they're decoding or not able to decode those words, they're not going to be able to understand what they're reading. So the first is a baseline fluency, and then we do it's called a phonics blending assessment, and for the younger grades it's very foundational skills, and then in the older grades, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, it's students reading multisyllabic words, and do they have the skills to decode bigger words? And then if they aren't able to do both of those, then we give a PRESS because something else is going on. So the PRESS diagnostic comes from the University of Minnesota, and it starts with letter sounds. Do they know all of their letter sounds? And then the next step is, can they read CVC or short vowel words? And then after that, the next skill they work on is digraph. So it's the 2 letters that make one sound, like TH, SH, CH. And then blends. So it's very progressive and very explicit in teaching skills that build upon each other. And then after the blends, long vowels, and then variant vowels. So we work through that progression if we notice that students don't have the skills they need in decoding the words. And that's just one like small but so important part of reading, is being able to lift the words off the page.
So Steve, you mentioned curriculum change or reviewing the curriculum. When we make the change, how long does the change last for? Because it sounds like, I mean, if we're reviewing, making the change, we're still a year out from a potential change being made.
Right, we're on curriculum review cycle, I believe, every 7 years. And the state examines state standards on a 7-year cycle, reviews and overhauls. And so we're in the midst of that process as a state. And then our calendar, which is guided also by board policy, is to review our curriculum in line with the state standard check. So the curriculum advisory and a team of staff and family involvement will examine our overall curriculum, make a determination if they want to continue with what we are using, if they want to make a different selection. There's a whole process outlined. There's a procedure component in the district curriculum advisory, and then there's a policy component with the board policy.
The reason why I asked, I'm just trying to get my head around if the change, if we're slow in making improvements, right, or we're seeing the numbers move up slowly, is there a way for us to be more nimble? And I get it's a slippery slope, right? Because you can't just willy-nilly and not be an educator, right? Mm-hmm. You can't willy-nilly make changes. On the flip side, I think of like my children's experience, and I think of some of the comments that we've had as a family, and as a business, as the school, you have to give time for employees to work things out, as an example. And in that, right, it's like, my kid can't wait that long. And so then my question too is like, if our kids are, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the data, but if our kids are not able to read, how are we able to pivot to help them learn faster? And I also get what you're saying too, of like, if it's we're doing it a different way and we're trying a different style and they're learning at a different level, I also, that's great, but I don't want them to be at a disadvantage from other kids at their age grade, right?
So the curriculum that we're using is actually a very common, well-utilized curriculum. And so it's not as simple as, oh, if we were to switch curriculum, we would begin seeing different levels of achievement. There are 5 components of balanced literacy. The science of reading that is now sort of the hot button topic is really focused on phonics and phonemic awareness, which is sounds, letters, letter sounds, and sounding out words and the sounds that they make. With the addition of our curriculum, so when I began in Richfield about, well, now almost 9 years ago, we actually had multiple curriculums and there wasn't an agreed upon set of reading instruction at that time in Richfield Public Schools. About 2 years later, we analyzed, implemented, and agreed on a literacy rollout. And then it takes a couple of years. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out just the right speed and noise. And so we agreed on a rollout, and then it takes a couple of years to create a strong implementation. And then the revision to that curriculum actually added a phonics component. And so then we were actually just in the beginning processes of adding systemic phonics across the district, and the pandemic hit. And so as we think about where our results are, we know from a scientific perspective we needed more phonics and phonemic awareness instruction. We were making those changes, and then COVID occurs, and we're basically in 2.5 years of sort of a strange instructional path. We are now back. We are now making gains. We are seeing progress like you heard about tonight at Centennial. We anticipate some different gains to bounce ourselves even further forward at this point. Again, looking at results that are not where we want them to be. But we believe at least this year with continued implementation as we move ourselves forward, we're not actually hampering ourselves by continuing on and doing what we know how to do effectively. And then it's also important to share that there is typically an implementation dip. And so when we think about, oh, we might change and have a different curriculum and first year, it's actually going to go the wrong direction, most likely. And research shows that that's generally what occurs in the first year of an implementation. Because teachers are more mechanical as they're figuring out how to use a curriculum rather than being able to use the full repertoire of skills that they have. And so that's something that's being worked on, again, within that time frame, if that makes sense.
And we know that it's curriculum and instruction. And so it's not just resting on the curriculum that we choose, which is very important. This is why we engage many stakeholder voices in selecting the appropriate curriculum, but it's also the instruction. This is where Amy's role is so important, because professional development days that are 3 times per year do not provide the appropriate support that teachers need to truly execute and implement the curriculum at a high level. And so with coaching, we have job-embedded professional development, job-embedded support in order to identify the skills that teachers may need additional support in to more fully implement and execute the curriculum. So it's a blending, it's a perfect blending, whatever perfect is, of curriculum and instruction to help our students continue to move forward in proficiency.
Thank you. 2 more slides forward, please. Detail oriented.
I didn't say anything. It's your birthday. You wasn't ready.
Slide 50, which is slide 7. Perfect, thank you. So you got the right one. So on this slide, and so this is quarter 1 growth. I think it's interesting, and I guess my request, and maybe this is not just a request for you guys, and this is maybe a request for other presenters. If we're getting them once a year, right, can we get data for the year, or, you know, whether you want to go backwards or forwards, however you want to do it, to give us more of a window of data? Because I'm curious about this of, again, so we're seeing growth, it's looking good. You know, do we get another update unfortunately, I guess, unfortunately, it'll be in 2 weeks. But we get another one towards the end of the year to understand how we're improving, or do we wait again for a year from now to hear this data? I mean, I think this is, as we continue to have our discussion about, like people staying in our district, right? How are we addressing this? How are we working on, how are we making sure that our kids are ready, right? We're here because we believe that this is the best district, and we want to make sure that that's the case, right? So how do we show the metrics? How do we show the data to say, hey, right, things are getting better? And also, I do understand COVID was tough, right? It's like, again, watching my kids at home, they struggled. And as a community, as people, we just tried to get along. Now we need to get back on track. We need to get back in school. We need to start doing something. And so how does it get better?
So in terms of Centennial, they aren't coming back this year. This is actually in their presentation because they chose, as part of their hosting this meeting or hosting, to talk about literacy in their literacy instruction. Middle school, when they came, they were talking about social emotional learning. High school talked about a counseling redesign. And so as our schools come, they present some of the exciting things happening at their school, and they're very excited about what's happening in literacy at Centennial. For us, we look at data several times a year. You're going to hear a lot about our data in the World's Best Workforce 2 weeks from now. We do repeatedly review certain points of data in my goals presentations, but then also in our vision cards, we have a completely comprehensive overhaul of most of the major data of Richfield Public Schools and student achievement. And that is looked at different points of the year, but the main presentations come in the spring. And so I'd say World's Best Workforce from a December perspective, and then vision card presentations in May and June give that broad-based overhaul of our data.
But we continue to keep this data too, like throughout the whole year, and that's something that I feel like is it's so important at Centennial, as we're really focusing on knowing where each and every student is, and the students that at or are above grade level, we're not continuing asking them to just read quickly. We're being thoughtful about their instruction on comprehension and vocabulary. So I just think that that's something that Centennial we've really have a good hold on right now. So
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I kind of am. Is it every quarter that you would report this, the growth? I mean, I know you ask teachers. I used to ask teachers for their fluency scores.
yeah, the teachers have a spreadsheet that they share with me, and then I made an Excel sheet that has each grade level on the bottom, and then we obviously can sort it different ways, and I update that monthly. So.
I guess my last comment is not necessarily a question, it's more of a comment. I think as I kind of reflect about the feedback that I've heard kind of from the community, and we talked about this in previous board meetings, I feel like it comes back to reading, right? Maybe reading is the first one that people see, and it's like, and if our kids fail or are stumbling, it's the most visible one, right? And it's like, and then that throws other, like, well, they can't read, they can't do anything else, and so therefore they're failing as a whole. So maybe that's why I'm so cognizant about it and why I'm asking my questions. So thank you for your patience, I appreciate the information.
I'll just briefly share, I mean, to go off of what you said, I'm also the Richfield board representative for District 287, and over at the South Education Center, their staff t-shirts this year say in the back, literacy and justice for all, which I think really sums up what we're talking about here, right? Like, literacy is foundational. We know that it creates opportunities and opens doors for our young people, which is why we're so passionate about it, and why I just appreciate what you're doing and what you've shared. And you said you're all about books, so am I. So just all of this was wonderful, and I think we're in a broader context where the conversations about what does it actually mean to teach kids to read, and what supports do our teachers and staff need to be able to do that well, is really popping in a way that is important and good. And I think it just means we need to be having these conversations over the next year to 2 years about what we're going to do with all that we're learning and all the expertise that lives within our district as well. So thank you.
Shindara, you have any questions or comments?
No questions, just a lot of comments because I miss elementary school and I'm really happy you guys are progressing. Thank you so much, especially for the book fair. I remember the book fair when I was in elementary school, and I think that opened the door of me loving to read. And like Ms. Brackey said, literacy is justice, because as we grow, we get to know, oh, who are we and how do we as human beings like stand in not only the world but in America in general. I also love the fact that we're veering farther away from reading fast to fluency, because I feel like when I was in elementary school, I feel like a lot of us were like, oh, we need to read so fast, but it doesn't matter if we read fast, because if we don't understand it, then what's the point? So just thank you, and thank you so much. And please let us know if you have any volunteer options for the book fair, because I would love to be there again. So thank you.
Me too. I'll come volunteer.
Thank you. Paola?
So I just want to say thank you for that presentation, and that for me it like really connected to me, because I remember when I was in Centennial and when I used to be a student, like an incoming kindergartner, I didn't know English at all. So when I had these teachers just like teach me English, it was really cool to see my progress from going and pronouncing a simple 4-letter word to pronouncing like a whole sentence in English. It was such a cool way to like track my progress. And even tiny little celebrations. It didn't have to be a pizza party. It didn't have to be like a new book. It just was simply like a compliment from a teacher, and just talking to my teacher and being like, Paula did a great job. She pronounced she read a whole book in English. It made me feel really good. So having that little celebration, even if it's not a pizza party, it just looks like all the kids are having such a great time. And I do agree with Chim and Ms. Brackey's comment that literacy is so fundamental within a child's education, by educating them to not read quickly but read fluently, because it's obviously a lot better to consistently read better than it is to go super fast, because I know for me that was like a very like important target for me, to read good, not faster. So I think it's really important that we are teaching kids that. So thank you.
Thank you. Elsie?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thank you for the presentation. It was really informative. Yeah, I really liked the example, the video of how you guys are teaching the kids, because I think that's something I should probably teach my brother instead, because I also struggled with reading. I think I didn't know English until I was like in the 4th grade, like properly. But I think seeing past what I kind of struggled with reading, I should probably implement this with my younger brother. So thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Number one, I like to get a better picture of what the literacy block looks like for everyone else. So when you are meeting with these kids, what does it look like? Are students reading independently? Are they reading in groups? What's going on?
So our curriculum is set up to have a mini lesson which teaches a strategy or a standard, and so the mini lesson is for all students, and that's a grade level content. And then after the mini lesson, there is some modeling of how to practice this strategy, and then students go off and work on their practice with independently, or they have different ways to practice it. They use technology a lot to practice reading, and then as students are working independently, teachers are working with small groups of students on what they need, the strategies that they need. And it could be a strategy group or a guided reading group, conferring with students, so talking with them about the comprehension piece, understanding, deeper level thinking and understanding. And then after the guided reading and the strategy groups and the independent practice, they come together for a closure. So making sure that they understand what was the goal for the day. And during the mini lesson, the goal, the learning target is shared, and then there's success criteria of how we're going to meet that goal. And then the closure kind of ties it all together. Did we meet that goal? Do we need to revisit it?
Thank you. That's very helpful. Help me envision what the block looks like. And about community engagement, I am wondering, you have quite a large population of Hispanic students and generally speaking English learners. And a lot of those literacy skills are transferable from one language to another. So I'm wondering if there's opportunity to speak to families about reading at home in any language in hopes that that comprehension, the fluency, can be then, kind of translated itself when they get to the part of their English where they can actually understand all of the vocabulary words.
Yeah. Do you want me to speak to that?
Yeah.
I would say as teachers, before this year I was a classroom teacher, and I always spoke with my families, and I think the teachers at Centennial, we encourage them to speak and communicate and read and grow in their native, their home language, because it does support the language that they're learning as well. It transfers, and it might feel a little bit bumpy in the early years, but eventually it all comes together. So we have really wonderful outreach workers, and during conferences we have translators that help us communicate with the families. So I feel like the teachers do a really great job of encouraging.
We have some reading interventionists as well who attend conferences, and our ESL teachers too. And I think the message from all the teachers at Centennial to parents and families is it's so important that you are fostering literacy at home, reading with your child, asking your child, did you bring a book home today to read? And of course, yes, reading in whatever language you choose at home is great. One of the things that we did with the One School, One Book is we only looked at titles that were available in English and Spanish. And then we gave our students and families a choice. Do you want to be reading at home in English or Spanish? And unfortunately, One School, One Book is not really ready to have books in every language that we have at Centennial, but hopefully that will come along. But it was, I think our families felt honored. They felt like their language was honored, and with having that choice. So yeah,
it's the same for this year too. We made
It's
sure,
the same this year,
we made sure that the book was available in Spanish for those families that needed that, and I just think that.
I think the message is a united and clear one, that the work that you do with your child at home couldn't be done in any language, and it's just important that it's happening to the extent that it can be happening at home. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that I think of when I was a teacher and thinking of the summer slide, and then thinking about COVID and what kind of long slide that was. I remember that children were expected to come back. I mean, this is first grade and second grade, but they were expected to come back in September behind 2 reading levels from the year before. And I really empathize with everyone working to ensure that all of that, I think of COVID, a lot of learning loss, and anything that we can do to just move on is amazing. And I think that what I want to celebrate in all of you and for Centennial and the students over there is that they know where they're going, because they know their goals. And when you know where you're going, you know what it looks like when you get there. And so if we don't have that investment from them, then it didn't matter what you did, they will get stuck, be bored. And so it's very encouraging to see that they're really interested. They know where they are, they know where they have to go, they celebrate their wins with all of you and the staff. So thank you. All right, there are no more questions then?
All right, just thank you to the team from Centennial. So we appreciate you taking the time and being with us. Great work.
You too.
All right, we have one commendation, and so Richfield Public Schools would like to commend Early Learning Coordinator Janelle Bullen for promoting a positive view of RPS in our district mission and vision. We received this communication from an RPS parent of a preschooler at Central. Yesterday, I was lucky to see a presentation by Janelle Bullen, Early Learning Coordinator. I wanted to share that she did an excellent job and left me with such positive feelings about the district's early childhood programs. She displayed passion for her job and a strong commitment to equity. Thank you. So thank you out to Janelle Bullen. We're proud of your work. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear from the community and celebrate wonderful staff. We're moving now to the consent agenda. And this is a collection of routine items that we consent to pass in bulk without individual discussion. However, I will pause for a moment just to see if there are any questions or requests before we proceed, or if there's any one item that anyone here on the board wishes to take out for a separate discussion.
I will move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Brackey and a second by Mr. Carter. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Chair votes aye, and the consent agenda is approved. We will now move to old business, and these are policies before us this evening for continued review and possible action for the board today. And we have the first one up is policy
303.
Evaluation of the superintendent and administrative guidelines.
Sorry, Chair Cole. We're trying to figure out that dance as you're standing in that spot, back and forth. So certainly amusing the people in the room. So for those of you streaming, yes, they're laughing not with, but at, and me not at Chair Cole. So,
what did I do now?
Yes,
No,
absolutely. So, evaluation of the superintendent and administrative guidelines. So this is a third read, and we are presenting this to you today for recommended passage. Most of the changes are in regard to our style format, but then also some updates to make sure that both the timeline and the specific details in relation to when we do things like the board chair collecting feedback from my direct reports, which occurs June and leads to that overall evaluation in July with public call out of that in August, just making sure that each of these components aligns to the actual process. And so we have finalized those changes and updated and have that for you tonight for recommended passage.
All right. Are there any questions?
Looks good.
Is there anyone willing to entertain?
I will move we approve policy 303 as revised.
I'll second.
We have a first motion by Ms. Brackey and a second by Ms. Mishek. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The chair votes aye. And policy 303, evaluation of the superintendent and administrative guidelines, point 1 and point 2 have been approved. We now move on to policy 304, closely related evaluation of administrators and administrative guideline 304.1.
Thank you, Chair Cole. We have this for a second read, not recommended for passage at this time, but has been updated to align to district branding and style guidelines. Some of those components of capital letters using the same terminology as in other policies, but then also, again, reviewing and updating to make sure that these align to both the language and process of what we follow in Richfield Public Schools. And so we have this for review with those updates, and we'll bring it back again at our next meeting for proposed approval.
Does anyone have recommended edits, questions to be answered? No? Okay, so we'll check back on this one next time. And now we move on to new business, and this is when we bring new stuff. And the first one is related to the board, also about evaluation. So it's policy 209, board self-evaluation and administrative guideline 201.1.
Yes, and so this is we'll call it a second read. And so we had this approximately 6 months ago, and then Board Member Brackey did an in-depth study of what was occurring in other districts, including bringing us the guidelines from a neighboring district, and so we have that in front of us with some red line changes, and then also an example of what is occurring in Hopkins Public Schools. So with that, I'll turn it over to Director Brackey.
Yes, I like that this is a first read of our second attempt. And I think the way that I would describe it is being very underwhelmed at the other models that were out there around board self-evaluation. And Allegra gets credit for sharing what Hopkins has done. And so that is in the board packet as a model. And I think just to highlight what feels really different to me about the Hopkins approach is that they're actually setting goals as a board. And I think that is what has felt missing for me, is in our current approach to board self-evaluation, it's really just like, how are we doing at being a board? It's not organized around a central focus of what do we want to be really doing this year as a board. And I think it's that switch from passive to active that is really appealing to me in the Hopkins example, instead of it just sort of being a very passive table that we would fill out about just like generally how we're doing. So that's the shift that I would like to see us go towards, but I understand that it is a shift, and so that's why it's coming back to see if that philosophically is appealing to folks. And I'm also mindful of the fact that we don't have our full board here tonight, and so you know, if it's just sort of general initial reactions, I think even that will be helpful, and then we'll figure out how to come back together as a full group and have a discussion about whether we want to move into this direction of like picking one or two big goals to focus on as a board, and then rooting our self-evaluation around the degree to which we have achieved and worked towards those goals. So open to any initial reactions. Feel free to also get in touch with me directly, and then we'll certainly need to make sure that we can have more conversation when all six of us are here.
I like the idea. I was unclear when I looked at the packet.
Right.
Why we had Hopkins in here. I was like, did somebody have a real bad misprint? Plagiarism.
Copy paste mistake.
Right, we don't do that in schools, that plagiarism is bad.
Okay, good, helpful, thank you.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, and I shared them because I really liked the format that the Hopkins board took this year for all the reasons you said. I also liked, what might not be clear is the 3 goal areas are the 3 areas that are across our district-wide, district goals and school site goals. And so we have a lot of frameworks within our strategic plan that we could also pull from. So I liked that, like, everyone's rowing in the same direction, but specific to the role of the board in supporting that work.
Yeah, I didn't say that, but could have and should have. That alignment with the strategic plan is compelling to me as well. So thinking about, for us, community, equity, and excellence being the pillars that we would organize ours around.
Okay. So we will continue to look at this. I know that we discussed in the past also seeing how these goals could have an impact on the schools that we support, where we are assigned, and to be more intentional about all of the things that we do. So I'm excited. Thank you, Ms. Brackey, for your research and your support, Ms. Mishek, with sourcing for information.
I will say I share an awful lot of Richfield documents with Hopkins as well.
It goes both ways.
Well, they're public documents.
Indeed.
Okay. Any other things before we move on to the next item? No? Okay. So we have today, our next item is a superintendent contract for years 2023 through 2026. Those are renewed every 3 years, and I will be I'd like to share a little bit of information about what went in to get to reviewing this contract. As you may know, Mr. Chair Polis is quite the wizard with all of the numbers and the research, and he did a wonderful job researching contracts in comparable districts. There were several meetings that he and Dr. Yunowski and I had in evaluating different components and also performance and checking previous records and all of that. So following this survey of comparable regional districts and their respective contracts, we match our compensation packages against theirs in all of the usual areas, informed by our own past practices, the current market rates, the longevity, the board's belief in the superintendent's performance, and we landed at an increase of approximately 4.9% in salary for year one, and the rest is as presented in the introduction and can be read from here. The adjustments allowing greater accrual and then sell back of unused sick time is fairly standard with regional superintendent contracts. And also want to add that we also consider contracts for other bargaining groups in the district because we have been, as a board, being very intentional to keep things also holistically. So let's dig in. Do we have any questions, comments about the proposed contract?
I thought you were about to speak. I was just going to say thank you for the work that has gone into this. And obviously, you know, we as individual board members have spent a lot of time looking at this and really thinking about the decisions that we get to make as a board. And I am proud and excited to support this.
Mr. Carter, you have any questions or comments?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't have any questions or comments.
Okay. Well, I don't have any questions or comments. I, like Crystal said, approve. You know, with enthusiasm, I've been been thinking deeply about this, of course, as we do all of the things, but really seeing what we've done in the past 7 years, what I've seen in the 7 of the 9 years that Superintendent Yunowski has been here, has always been encouraging. And also thank you to Mr. Holgi for all of the also research and providing information that team and I requested, and also supporting every time we came over for a little meeting here at the district office. So is anyone ready to move, make a motion for approval of this contract?
I move that we approve the contract.
I'll second. We have a motion by Mr. Carter and a second by Ms. Mishek. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. The chair votes aye, and the contract for Superintendent Yunowski, years to 2023 through 26 is approved. Thank you. Okay, and then we have quite a shift of gears here. We have a draft for our 2023 legislative platform.
That is correct, and so we took a look at a first draft. This will go through 3 reads with our board because there is a legislative session coming up, and obviously we needed to wait until after the election, not knowing what would occur, and trying to align past practice to where we are going in the future. And so we did look at the Association of Metropolitan School Districts platform, which was just passed this past Friday. We have examined the proposed platform of Minnesota Association of School Administrators and also Minnesota School Boards Association. And then we also looked at our past platform to come back with many of the same things that we have looked at in the past. But these are the things for our board to look at that I will review once now, but I won't read through them again in the future, just to give a little context. So really looking at fully funding special education and English learner programs. And so just to put in perspective, Approximately $6 million of the special education program is what's called the cross subsidy, or the amount that is not funded by the state of Minnesota. And so there are needs of our students that we are morally and legally obligated to fulfill through special education, and those just aren't funded from the state. And so a cross subsidy is when you take money from other areas to utilize in that area, or underfunded is another way of looking at it. And then the English language learner program is approximately $1.5 million per year underfunded. And so those are things that, if the state met its obligations, would be a wonderful thing for Richfield Public Schools and our students. Increasing the basic funding formula. So platforms across the state are asking for 5% in the first year and 5% in the second year. We historically have asked for a 2% increase, and there is a significant inflation, and so that's one of the things we project us having a conversation about. And then also allowing locally elected school boards to renew an existing operating referendum. So it takes significant time and effort to go out and ask for the same money that has already been approved by voters. And so it wouldn't be asking for more money, but it would be to allow school boards to approve that without going out to vote. Continuing to remove barriers and providing incentives for the shortage of substitutes, school bus drivers, paraprofessionals, and other staff, because all of us know, our students have experienced it, and we all have experienced it as a staff shortage across not just our system, but in basically the entire education system in the state of Minnesota. And then continuing to expand programs and incentives to attract, develop, and retain teachers of color. Through all of the efforts that have been made over the past 5 years, the state has gone from approximately 4% teachers of color to still under 5% teachers of color. Richfield at the same time has gone up to approximately 20 to 22% teachers of color. And so we have been very successful, but our colleagues across the state have struggled. And so we want to continue our momentum, and we also want to provide those options across the state. Funding existing mandates and opposing new unfunded mandates. And so just reminding that expectations for school districts that come without finances are actually a burden. And so just reminding of that. We've repeatedly asked to replace the high school MCA exams with the nationally recognized college entrance exams. And the state statute requires an exam, but we could look at switching. One of the things we had in our last meeting was to change, or last year was to change open meeting law. School boards are one of the only groups that don't typically allow for hybrid board meetings as an option, the same way that others are provided that option. We all have to actually publish physically the location and have the ability for people to access us publicly, and that isn't required of the state legislature, that isn't required of the city council, that is only required of school boards. And then addressing disparities, exploring new application and eligibility processes for free and reduced lunch, and then specifically pointing out that if universal free meals are a supported initiative, which it has been free meals across the state for the last couple of years, ensuring that compensatory education and Title I dollars are held harmless for districts. So just as a reminder to us, compensatory education is funding for students who live in poverty. We received approximately $6 million per year in years pre-COVID. That reduced with universal free meals to almost $4 million, or $2 million in funding for things like social workers, outreach workers, literacy intervention, and math intervention. Those finances disappeared, and a significant part of that was the identification process for free and reduced lunch. So if we do decide to do that and have that across the state, making sure that federal poverty qualification is determined using a new methodology that doesn't impact the same way that it did. And then also, we have every 2 years had to re-up for voluntary pre-K, and so 4-year-old programming is always at risk, so making that funding permanent. And so those are things that we are suggesting we discuss, or suggesting we very seriously look at as being our legislative platform.
Thank you. We have any questions about the agenda? The platform, I should say, not the agenda. The legislative platform.
Go ahead. I have some too. You go first.
No, you go first. Ladies first.
Thank you. I think the first thing, fully funding special education and English learner programs would have a significantly larger effect on us as a district than the funding formula. And so I think it's just important to be clear that, like, this is this is what we start with, but we also need to make clear, you know, what are the order of priority for us. And I think as a district, I would assume our position is fully funding special education and English learner programs would be significantly more beneficial for us, for our students, for our community, than that, you know, formula at 5 instead of at 2, for example. The one thing that like really struck me as odd as I read it is the if universal free meals are a supported initiative language, because I feel like they should be. So maybe that should be part of our platform instead of just saying if they are, then we need to make sure that the compensatory challenges are addressed. So I think something in the language just made me feel like we're skipping the important thing of saying like whether or not we actually believe meals for kids should be free. And I personally feel very strongly that they should.
Yeah, I read it with perhaps an air of sarcasm.
Oh.
Like, if you're saying universal meals should be free, then, but that would probably allow for more clarity to add it specifically. I don't think I have anything else to add. I've been there's a few things that I personally really care about, but I think that our priorities are captured. Our collective priorities are captured.
Care to share?
Gifted and talented identification and metrics for that. If we were ever to consider identifying all students as gifted or no students as gifted, there aren't much allowances for that currently in statute. And I was able to attend the AMSD meeting last week, and there were some compelling suggestions around innovation and ways to incentivize that. But I have found in Richfield that we are innovating within current statute. Like, we've found ways to do that. So that's more of like a statewide thing I care about than Richfield specific, if that makes sense.
So I would like to agree with Crystal's comments. I mean, I think and I guess that's some of
It's okay.
Your sarcasm comment, right? I mean, it's like, I think we should be saying we want free lunch rather than we want free lunch, and if it's given, right, it's like, then we want this not to ding us.
Yeah.
Right, so we'll certainly change the platform. I just want to spell out again, and I'll give a couple details to funding. So pre-COVID, we received $6 million in comp ed, and universal free lunch was non-existent. When universal lunch became existent, we went down to $4 million, and everyone received a free lunch. So essentially, and ironically, free lunch cost the district about $2 million. And so without a larger discussion about priorities or where money should go, $2 million essentially went from reading, math, intervention, outreach workers, social workers into free lunch. We now no longer have free lunch, and we are up to $5.9 million in comp ed again. And so it has literally bounced all the way back up, and the money has come back. The biggest worry I would have, based on how government functions, is yes, I believe 100% that universal free lunch should occur. And I'm not sure our government would then figure out how to make the compensatory dollars not disappear. And so without those hooked together in some way, I'm concerned that we would be taking money from one area serving student needs and moving it to another, serving other student needs.
The only thing I would say is missing from the picture you just described is that now we are billing our students and their families. And that is absent from the narrative.
Correct. Good point. And then to double down on Ms. Bracke's point about 5%, well, 5% sounds like a very large amount of money. 5% on the formula for students is about $1.5 million to Richfield Public Schools. whereas the special ed cross subsidy is $6 million to Richfield Public Schools. And so there is a larger gap in what the state's unfunded obligations are than what would be a historically large inflationary increase to the funding formula. And so special ed cross subsidy or special ed unfunded is very important to Richfield Public Schools as a financial priority.
There has been a working group since last spring studying the alternatives to measure poverty in absence of free and reduced price meals. There are some things they have been discussing, such as using enrollment to Medicaid or being able to receive support with meals, food stamps, and different things. But again, that's just the task force that started last spring. So it'll be interesting to see this year where the group is at with this investigation, because it is I don't think it should be up to the families to just have to fill out that form. It just feels weird to me as a parent, and this idea, like, knowing that the government has the systems to just pull that information, at least in great part. So that would be something, good to push forward.
So, do we need to solve the problem in our legislative platform?
No, what we'll do is we'll look at the input given by the board members and try to reword based in alignment. That's why we do the multiple reads. And so we will, Ms. Kwam has been furiously taking notes of both words and intentions, and so we'll try to translate that into proposals for our next read of the legislative platform and see if we catch it better.
Okay.
One of the things that you said, we try to have a limited scope in our platform.
Mm-hmm.
In that, that's a dangerous question, but do we prioritize it? I think of again, let's talk about evaluations, right? Almost doing like a ladder ranking of saying, here's our priority from number 1 to number 12 of which of these is most important to us. And if we have to draw a line and we say we only want 10, then the last 2 drop off the list. I know it's a painful discussion, but if we're trying to keep it tight, right? Have we gone through that exercise as to what's most important to us as a district?
I think one thing that matters is what year in the legislative session you're in. If it's a budget year, then the focus is going to be more on these items that are tied to dollars. If it's a non-budget year, then the focus is more on the policy items. So that is one way that this gets divided fairly naturally.
That really makes sense.
And which one are we in now?
What's that?
Which one are we in now?
We're about to go into budget year.
Budget, yeah.
Okay.
I like the idea of the prioritization of this, because we are going to have a meeting soon with our legislators, right, our local.
January or early February, I believe.
And so, and I know we've shared this information. This platform is not new. They're aware. I think they can be very supportive. And I'm wondering what our role is to, in the advocacy side of things, to be more not just share, but can we get some commitments?
If they, when they come and talk to us, if you say, these are the 3 top most important things you take away, on a list of 10, that's still not all of them, right? And so, just food for thought. We don't need an answer now. I wanted to throw that out there. And I do have one more thing. So we've gotten some feedback, and being the IT guy that I am, right, if we're the lowest in the U.S. when it comes to computer science literacy, I would be interested to see how we get that on here in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Right, and Mr. Carter is referring to Matt Caruso, one of our high school teachers, is part of a group about computer science and computer science education, and he believes that the state of Minnesota should work to put more focus and improvement into computer science education. And so he shared with us a proposal and share that with a couple of board members. And so we can certainly look at what that would look like language-wise, integrating in here as a possible addition for us to discuss also at our next meeting.
Yes. It's also, I mean, just as well, I heard it from Matt. Matt brought it up to our attention. And some of the groups that I'm involved in from a real world career perspective are groups that have been advocating this as well. So I thought it was definitely interesting.
All right, I think we have enough information to draft number 2. I'm going to bring it back in 2 weeks.
Question about for replacing the high school MCA exams with recognized college entrance exams. So is this like a proposition, or is this like something that's like actually like going to happen? And then also, like, how would we replace that? Would high school students be enrolled in AP classes, or like how is that going to go?
Got it. So what happens with our legislative platform is each year we talk about our priorities and we push our elected officials to have that conversation at the Capitol. This has been on our priority list for
5 years.
And it hasn't passed.
And it came from students, I will say.
Yeah, this originated actually in 2017 with Reimagine Richfield, and our students shared this. What this would look like is you all end up taking the ACT as part of high school. That would then count, and you wouldn't have to take the MCA. And so that's the proposal that was basically made by our students. Now, the ACT or the SAT are no longer required everywhere, but the state of Minnesota still expects it. And so we could just have students take the ACT and be done. And so that's how ideally it would work. Is that something you're particularly interested in?
The legislature disagrees, is why it hasn't happened.
No, because I was wondering, because I know for sure in 11th grade we take the math MCA, and then we also have the ACT. So I was wondering, like, okay, like which one is more important? Like which one do we take? Like, is the math MCA, like, are we still taking it? So like I was wondering, like, is this for upperclassmen and lowerclassmen, or is this just like an upperclassmen thing?
So this would, if this were to pass, that would mean that the high school MCA would disappear completely. And the only test of that nature would be the ACT. And well, I won't tell you which test is more important. What I'll say is that the ACT can be used to get you into college, and the high school MCA can be used for nothing. So do with that what information you would like. I know, sorry, Dr. D. All right. To be more fair, the MCA is a way that the schools are judged based theoretically on their effectiveness. So one of the challenges from school administrators and educators, wow, I'm getting laughed at a lot, is that trying to get students to put their best foot forward on a test that from a student perspective, this has no impact on your life, and from a school's perspective, this is how the world might look at our school's effectiveness. So, is that better, Dr. B? I'm in trouble now.
Director Carter?
Yeah, people are looking at MCA scores, which it's a complex test. And ironically, wasn't even designed to determine student achievement in the first place.
Just going to keep on going, aren't you?
I'm going to keep digging a hole. I mean, if I'm going to pass the MCA, yeah. All right, I'm done.
Wait, sorry, I have a question too. To add that, would that mean more like preparation for the ACTs? Because I know, like, for the MCAs, I remember like a week before it, we would be like rushing to like, oh, this is what everything is. You guys have to learn everything in a week. So would that mean like more preparation for the ACTs beforehand?
Yes.
Okay.
As always, I feel like the students should be the ones going to the legislature to testify about this.
I'm already organizing them in my head.
I know, it's a fight at the legislative level whether or not we should do this. And we keep saying, well, this is what our students are telling us. And our students are pretty eyes wide open about what the tests are and are not. But there's a disconnect at the Capitol.
Any other questions? So we will see this again in 2 weeks, see how what it looks like. And we can now move on to the final levy certification for 2022.
That is correct. So this is a resolution, so we're going to ask you to ask for a poll of the board. So this is the 2022 payable 2023 levy limitation and certification, which was shared out earlier tonight in the Truth in Taxation hearing, and the backup data is in the next slide. But we are asking the board to resolve that the total levy to be levied in 2022, collected 2023, is set at $28,556,211.55. And so with a resolution that would authorize us to move forward.
So this is the second part, the next steps from Mr. Holdy's earlier presentation. And we have conversations about this in the last couple of meetings at least. Are there any questions? Is anyone ready to make a motion to approve this certification?
I'll move
form?
to approve the final levy certification for 22, payable 23.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Mishek and a second by Ms. Brackey. This is a resolution, so I will poll the board. Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Mishek?
Aye.
Ms. Brackey?
Aye.
And chair votes aye, and the resolution carries. Thank you very much. And we move on now to resolution designating polling places for 2023.
All right, so we are on a roll of resolutions. So each year we have to set our polling places in December, and so generally we set those, and those are available for caucuses, primaries, and all the way through November. They can be changed with a 90-day motion, but we do not anticipate that. These are the same polling places that were there for vote in 2022. And so we are sending this to the board to recommend so that the city may move forward in organizing their election. And if the question is about not being in schools, yes, that was a collaborative decision made with the city in regard to student safety, because they're typically during the school day. And these are very effective sites as determined from this last election in the city of Richfield.
All right.
So my one question, so the new normal is there will not be elections held in schools, is what it sounds like?
We do not anticipate
Okay.
elections to be held in schools in any time in the near future in Richfield. That's correct.
All right. We have a motion to pass this resolution designating polling places for next year.
I move the resolution designating polling places for 2023.
I second.
I have a motion by Ms. Brackey and a second by Ms. Mishek. Any questions? Mr. Carter, I'm looking at you. You look like you have a question.
I'm thinking about what you said, and I'm just processing, I guess. So we're doing it in churches for school safety, which is great. And the only question I have is, does it put any undue pressure on our constituents? And it's more of a hypothetical question or rhetorical, I guess.
So I have been an election judge several times in the last three years in Richfield, both in a school setting and in a non-school setting. And I think while there are great benefits for election days being a time for people can actually come inside our schools and see our schools in a way that many often don't get a chance to, our schools are not well set up to be polling places because you have to navigate the building to get to the gym, to get to whatever room is large enough. Whereas in these other spaces, like the community center where I was an election judge just a couple of weeks ago, it is far more accessible. It is far more immediate and far more obvious where you're supposed to be, in my experience, than when it is being held in one of our school buildings. So I might not be understanding what you mean, though, when you're asking about accessibility.
Yeah, I mean, they're open the same hours, right? And it's, yeah, and you say we in concert with the city council make the decision? So is that our administration, their administration?
We've worked together with the city manager and the head of elections for the area, yes.
Okay.
I think when I was an elementary teacher, before the country started, things started happening the way they do now, I looked forward to election day being in the building because we would take the kids to vote and watch the process. They were generally at the gym, there was a stage, they would participate, and it just made a lot of sense. What it has come down now is that it's become a safety issue, as you can imagine. Just anyone who wants to has access to that building to go to, even if you might say, like, let's secure this area, like people go, someone needs to go to the restroom, and just so, if there are other options like we do have in the city of Richfield, then it just makes sense. I think if we had a lack of venues, then we can revisit that. But right now, I think in the last couple of election cycles, we have been, I think we've been getting our, changing of polling site if applicable. There's early voting happening. There's the absentee ballots, no excuse. And
Yeah, I think at this point, the bigger challenge is actually if they keep changing.
Right.
The number of people who are going to a different polling place every time is a lot. And that is the frustrating experience. So I would actually be more concerned if we were like flip-flopping back and forth between schools and not schools.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the only other question I have is, and I think about my specific polling place, is parking, right? And granted, we're not in a presidential year, but it's, I'm curious if that will change it and how parking and traffic, like I look at some of these locations of, like right on Xerxes or Penn or Nicollet, right? They're all on kind of major roads. It's like, what does their parking look like, and does that create problems for, again, the people of Richfield? So as long as we're continuing to evaluate it, and again, I appreciate your comment, Crystal, about, we don't want to flip-flop, we don't want to continue to change it because it's a mess trying to communicate that out. I'm fine. So thank you for the patience.
And if I'm not mistaken, we started this when we started doing construction, right? So this was a while ago, and then we just kept it that way.
Correct, and have continued to finalize locations as we know that these other sites are effective from a city perspective and from our perspective.
All right. So,
Which does include parking, I will say.
So to step back, we had a motion by Ms. Brackey, a second by Ms. Mishek. It's a resolution. I will pull the board. Ms. Brackey?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Mishek?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and the resolution carries for polling places for 2023. And this is the last resolution for the evening to approve cooperative sponsorship agreement.
Yes, and so synchronized swimming, girls synchronized swimming, sometimes when we or a partner school or an area school don't have enough students to field a full team, we go into cooperative partnership. Richfield and Minnehaha Academy would like to form a co-op with synchronized swimming. Richfield will only have 10 swimmers. Minnehaha actually has one girl who is interested in participating and wouldn't be able to participate if we didn't offer that opportunity. And so we don't think this would impact our competitive level or our conference, and our conference is in support of the opportunity. And so we come to you tonight with this as a cooperative sponsorship.
I have one question, and I apologize that I just honestly didn't catch it until now. Holy Angels is listed on the form, and so I'm wondering why Holy Angels is on the form but not in the description.
We already have a cooperative sponsorship with Holy Angels, so this is an add-on to the.
So it is three schools coming together? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sorry. And when we continue a co-op, we don't have to bring it back. It just continues on without conversation. Or we can move them forward.
Then I will gladly move the resolution so that Minnehaha Academy can join our cooperative with us and Holy Angels.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Brackey and a second by Mr. Carter. Say resolution again. I'll pull the board. Ms. Mishek?
Aye.
Mr. Carter?
Aye.
Ms. Brackey?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, and the resolution carries. And we have arrived to a beautiful part of our meeting, which is to accept donations from all the thoughtful people who invest in our kiddos.
Absolutely. So it's recommended the Board of Education accept the following donations with gratitude. And we talked about the first one earlier. Richfield High School received a donation in the amount of $25,069.77 from Lillian Yamamoto of Edina. So thank you, Lillian Yamamoto. The RPS Sunshine Lunch Account received a donation of $50 from Sue Kinneberg of Richfield. Thank you, Sue Kinneberg. Richfield Dual Language School received a donation of $500 from Mississippi Park Connection for field trip bus transportation. So thank you to Mississippi Park Connection. And then Richfield Middle School received a donation of technology supplies valued at $350 for STEM classes from Jessica Kanowski of Richfield. Thank you, Jessica Kanowski.
All right. We have a motion to receive these donations.
I move to accept the donations with gratitude.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Mishek and a second by Mr. Carter. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And the chair votes aye, and the donations are approved, and we are so very grateful for your support of Richfield students. We are now in this side of our agenda about advanced planning. Legislative update is at the top. It feels like we maybe did like half of the conversation on that one, but let's see what other updates are out here.
I will just extend an invite, and honestly, I don't remember if I did this at the last meeting. Did I talk about the session preview happening for the Association of Metropolitan School Districts? Okay, perfect. Thank you for the nods. But yeah, January 6th, 8 a.m., virtual and in person, and it's a bunch of legislators, superintendents, and board members from all around the Metro School District. So I'll share the invitation, especially the Zoom link, if it would be easier to attend from the comfort of your home and pajamas.
Please do. I will be in my pajamas.
I will be there in person, trying to look professional.
Yeah, no. Anything else? We have any? Yeah, go for it.
Well, I have a random comment.
Oh, please do. Yes,
I don't know if it's an accommodation or not. And I have a question, I guess, too, in case, well, I have a question.
Sorry. That wasn't directly.
Come on up, Greg. So, having been the pizza delivery guy for the middle school dance, right, I just wanted to share a couple quick comments, because it's pretty cool, right? It's like, I got dragged into it, I wasn't necessarily thrilled about it, and then I was very happy that I was part of it and kind of around to see it. And so I thought I'd share with you guys a couple quotes that were heard that night. So the kids were super excited, and they're like, "This is epic." I'm like, right?
High praise.
This is the best party I've ever been to. This is the best night of my life, right? And I was like, how does that not warm your heart? And then I just want to give a shout out and a thanks to the PAG group, and then over 80 parents, staff, and community members were volunteered that night. I mean, it's just crazy amount of people pulled together, in addition to a gazillion amount of students, and then like watching them do the drawings, and they had so many awards. And again, the kids loved it and had a great time. So I wanted to share that because it was great being a part of it. I'm glad I stayed to help clean up. And I do want to send just a special note too to just all the faculty and staff. And I hope they understand how important and how much of an impact they have when they're involved in these events. Because just like watching my kids, right? It's like just the way they glow. Specifically, we actually had a couple staff members even show up to their basketball games. And it was like just they saw, like several of the students saw the teacher show up, and they're just like, I mean, you know, like they're like looking away from the game, like trying to wait, right? And it's like, it's cute to just see that. And so again, I really appreciate our staff and our, just faculty, administration coming and spending their time, their evenings to participate. So thank you all.
Thank you so much for sharing, and that is a great start to information and questions.
Sorry, I jumped ahead.
No, you did not. You were right on time.
Well, and then that was my other question. Did anybody go to the kindergarten roundup? Because I looked and I was like, I should go, and I was like, I was tired from the night before. No one?
No, maybe.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call anybody out.
I mean, it's a good example of how it's both wonderful to go to things and it can be really hard.
Yeah.
I went to a dance at our DLS. It was fun. I don't know about middle schoolers, but young elementary students, they're always surprised to hear that teachers have parents and houses and go places. Did that ever happen to anyone here teaching early grades?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like, why you have a mom? Those are actual quotes from a student. Okay.
I do have one thing. Tim, our board chair, hi Tim, who can't be here tonight, but is watching, just asked for a reminder to think about our organizational meeting, which will be the very first thing that we do in January around board roles for the coming year. So he's thinking about it and is gonna just make sure that it's on the top of our minds. And so we might talk about it at our next meeting, just so that we are fully prepared for that first organizational meeting in January.
Isn't it something about if you don't show up, you get volunteered for a position? That's,
I don't think we try to operate that way.
no, okay. I thought I'd check. Since he's watching.
Thank you, Crystal and Tim. I wanted to put in a plug to everybody, but especially our student board members. The city of Richfield is looking for youth commissioners on all of the city commissions, but especially the Human Rights Commission. So if you or anybody you know is interested in a leadership position within the city, it's a great opportunity to advocate for human rights in Richfield and specifically how they impact youth. So if you can reach out to me or just go to the city website, and they would love to receive some applications.
Wonderful. So, you heard the call. If you have friends, you want to go
We'll
yourself.
definitely take you up on that.
Yeah. All right, I will. I will.
Wonderful. Right. Any other information, questions? Right, so then we have our future meeting dates are December 19 at 7 o'clock, right here at the board meeting. There will be an opportunity for public comment that evening. And following that, we will have our first meeting of the year on January 3rd, 2023. That will be a Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. And like Crystal shared, it will be the board organizational meeting where we will elect chair, vice chair, treasurer, clerk positions for the upcoming calendar year. Any suggested or future agenda items? Going once, and twice, all right. Well then, we can just adjourn this meeting. Thank you everyone for your attention and happy birthday, Eric, again.
Happy birthday.
Birthday.